The world we live in hides shadows too dark to comprehend. Abandoned churches, secret rituals, and the whispers of things never meant to be heard. There are stories buried beneath floorboards, carved into forgotten walls, and sealed behind doors that were never meant to open. Tonight, on the Night Files, you won't just hear a story, you'll step into it. So turn the lights off, put your headphones on, and whatever you do, don't look behind you. Let's begin. I was 17 the summer my mother sent me to Wellspring Sanctuary, a Christian retreat deep in the hills of Montana. She thought it would straighten me out, her words, not mine, after she caught me drinking with some friends behind a gas station. I was already grounded, but she wanted to go nuclear. The retreat was supposed to be wholesome, peaceful, cleansing. The van ride was long and quiet. No phones allowed, no music. Just a group of kids around my age, most of them blank-faced, dressed in plain clothes, like they'd been stripped of their personalities. I remember thinking one of the girls in the back looked drugged. She was staring at the floor like something would crawl out of it. We arrived at dusk. The sun was just dipping behind the pine trees, casting long shadows across the field. The main building looked like an old lodge, rustic, wood-paneled, with a giant cross hanging above the doorway. There were cabins around it, numbered in white paint. I was assigned to cabin 3. The leader, a man named Brother Isaac, greeted us with a beaming smile and outstretched arms. His teeth were too white, too many. Welcome to Wellspring, children. This is where sin is washed away, where noise becomes silence, and silence becomes truth. That night, they served us bland soup and made us sing hymns I'd never heard before. Then, lights out by 9 p.m. sharp. No talking, no whispering, not even coughing. A chubby counselor stood by the cabin doors and watched us while we slept, his eyes never blinking. The weirdness didn't take long to show itself. The second morning, we were woken up by a loud gong. Not a bell, a literal metal gong. We had to jog, barefoot, to the chapel for morning blessing. They made us kneel on cold stone for an hour while Brother Isaac spoke in a language that didn't sound like Latin, or English, or anything human. I kept sneaking glances at the other kids. Their eyes were wide, dilated. One girl's mouth moved like she was repeating his words, but her tongue was twitching unnaturally, like it had a life of its own. By day 3, I started hearing chanting at night. At first, I thought it was in my head, a soft murmur, like distant singing. But when I pressed my ear to the wooden floor of the cabin, I could hear it clearly, rhythmic, layered, like multiple voices blending into one low growl. Aranuke Nalamesh. Aranuke Nalamesh. It didn't stop for hours. It would start again every night, always around 2:33 a.m. Exactly. I started setting a timer. Always 2:33. On the 5th day, a girl named Rachel disappeared. We were walking to the creek to cleanse our spirits when she tripped and hit her head on a rock. Not too hard, but enough to bleed. The counselors freaked. They carried her to the chapel instead of the infirmary. Later, they told us she was resting. I tried asking the others if they'd seen her. Nobody answered, not even a head shake. It was like she never existed. Even the girl in the bunk next to hers just stared forward, lips pressed tight. That night, the chanting was louder, closer. I pressed my ear to the floor again and nearly screamed. Underneath the wood, I could hear Rachel, crying, screaming, and then chanting, her voice layered with the others. That was the moment I knew. They were underneath us, somewhere below the cabins, below the chapel. There was something hidden, and whatever it was, they were turning us into it. I tried to leave the next morning. During meditation time, I slipped into the woods, but not 30 feet in. Two of the counselors appeared from behind trees like they'd been waiting. One had a shovel. The other grabbed me by the neck and whispered, "You've already heard the song. It's inside you now." They didn't hit me. They didn't yell. They just walked me back to the cabin and locked the door from the outside. I remember scratching at the wood for hours. That night, I stayed awake. I waited for 2:33 a.m. Right on time, the floor began to hum. The boards vibrated softly beneath my mattress. And then a trapdoor in the corner clicked open. Not from above, from beneath. A small hand rose up. Then another. Children. Their skin was pale, their eyes rolled back. They were murmuring the chant again. But this time it felt like it was coming from inside my skull. I froze. One of them opened its mouth wider than it should have been able to. Teeth like needles. I could see blood on her collar. It was Rachel. She reached toward me. Not to grab, to offer. Her hand held a small, folded note. I took it, shaking. The second I touched it, the children retreated. The trapdoor slid shut. The note said, "They are not the ones chanting. The chanting is what keeps them from screaming." I didn't sleep. I waited until sunrise and showed the note to the head counselor. His expression didn't change. He simply said, "Now you know. That is the truth. Accept it or join it." I faked compliance the next few days. Prayed louder. Ate the bland food. Sang the hymns. Then on day 9, during the creek walk, I escaped for real. I dove into the water, let the current carry me, and crawled out 2 miles down the river. I'm 29 now. My mom never believed a word of it. Wellspring still exists. It changed names. It's now called Ever Mercy. Still a retreat. Still life-changing. The new website looks clean and modern, but I know what's under the chapel floor. And I know that one night, at 2:33 a.m., the chanting will stop, and we'll all hear what they were really holding back. They told us never to go near room 11. Not during the day, especially not at night. At St. Verena's purification camp, everything had a rule. Curfew at 9. No speaking during meals. No electronics. No questions. But the loudest rule, repeated daily during cleansing prayer, was, "The founder's room is sacred. Enter not, lest you wake what sleeps within." They never explained who the founder was. There were no pictures, no mentions in their weird hymn books. Just the door, room 11, at the end of the east hallway in the main lodge, and the way everyone avoided looking at it. I was sent there at 15 after my foster home collapsed. They told me it was a retreat for troubled girls, but it felt like a prison. Gray uniforms, bland food, constant sermons about silence cleansing the soul. Most of the girls there were quiet, too quiet. My roommate, Ivy, was different. She snuck me candy on the first night and whispered that she'd been here once before. 2 years ago, I ran away. They caught me. This time I won't. When I asked about room 11, she went pale. It wasn't always locked, she said. They used to let us clean it. I asked what was inside. She said, "Nothing. That's the problem." 3 days in, I started noticing the tapping. It came from the east hallway, always after lights out. 3 slow taps, then silence, then another 3, like Morse code, but too irregular. I asked one of the counselors about it. She smiled and replied, "The founder speaks to us in subtle ways." The next night, the taps came again, louder, closer. I got out of bed and tiptoed to the end of the hallway. The other doors were closed, but room 11's handle was turning. Slowly, I ran back to bed, heart racing. Ivy said the founder wasn't just a priest. He was chosen, the first to arrive. When this place was built on ancient silence. But one night, something happened in room 11, something that made the other sisters lock the door forever. "They didn't bury his body," she whispered. "They kept it, because it still breathes sometimes." I thought she was joking until the next night. When I walked past room 11 during storm watch duty, the door was open. Inside, the room was wrong. It was perfectly clean, everything white, a bed with no sheets, a table with a single candle, a mirror that didn't reflect me right. My reflection blinked when I didn't. On the bed was a person, not a corpse, not a man. It was like someone had wrapped skin over a bundle of wires and stuffed it in a human mold. No eyes, no mouth. But it was breathing. The chest rose and fell in soft, choking motions. Then it sat up. I screamed. The counselors found me passed out in the hallway. Ivy was gone. They told me I imagined everything. I tried to escape the next morning, but couldn't find the main gate. The road curved back on itself. No cars, no staff, no signal. I kept hearing the taps. Louder now. One night, I woke up with the sound coming from under my bed. I rolled over and saw Ivy, or what used to be her. Pale, eyes sunken, whispering something over and over. "He's not dead. He's dreaming. He dreams us all." I was rescued 3 weeks later after someone tipped off child services. I never found out who, but when I searched St. Verena's years later, I couldn't find any mention of it. No records, no website, no location on the map, just one archived newspaper clipping. Former religious camp burned in ritual fire, all 47 occupants missing. Only room 11 survived the flames. The invitation came in a black envelope with gold lettering. No return address. It simply said, "You've been chosen for the beckoning, a retreat for the awakened. Reply by blood." It was addressed to me, full name, accurate, which was already weird. But the creepiest part was that the reply slip had a small red circle, where I was meant to press my finger. A drop of blood. A literal blood signature. I thought it was a joke, but I did it. 3 days later, a black car picked me up at 3 a.m. I wasn't told the destination. I wasn't allowed my phone. The driver never spoke. We arrived in the mountains, far from everything. The retreat building was made of black stone, shaped like a triangle. It had no windows, just a door that opened before we knocked. A man in white robes greeted me. His eyes were completely white. "You've come home," he said. Inside, there were no beds, no lights, just dozens of people in robes, kneeling silently. There was no speaking aloud, only the sound of distant flutes, like breathing made musical. That first night, they shaved my head, gave me a robe, took my clothes. I asked one of the other guests why they joined. She whispered, "My dreams said this is where the world ends." Every night, they woke us at 2 a.m. We had to march in silence down a long, spiral staircase beneath the stone building. The air grew colder the deeper we went. At the bottom was a round chamber. In the center, a pit. We weren't allowed to look into it, but we heard it. It sounded like a heartbeat, mixed with crying and laughter, thousands of voices, all whispering one word: feed. One girl broke the rules. She peeked over the edge. Her eyes turned black, and she walked into the pit smiling. She never screamed. The final night, they handed out knives. Only the truly awakened will survive, the man in white said. Only those who offer flesh may inherit the void. People began cutting themselves, chanting. One man sliced off his ears. Another stabbed his tongue and threw it into the pit. I refused. I ran. I got out into the woods and kept running until I found a gas station. The clerk called the police. But when they searched the area, there was no retreat. No building. No pit. Nothing. Just trees. Untouched. But the black envelope was still in my pocket. And last night, I found a new one on my pillow. It said, "You ran, but the void remembers. This time, you won't have legs." This story isn't mine. It's my uncle's. He worked as a night manager at a Christian retreat hotel upstate and swore this happened in 1997. One rainy night, a woman checked in alone. She looked normal, quiet, booked room 9, paid cash, no ID. My uncle said she had strange eyes, too reflective, like glass. She came down once to ask for towels, then vanished. At checkout the next day, room 9 was empty, clean, untouched, like no one had stayed, except the towels were folded on the bed, and a note sat on top. "I'm still in here. Don't let them open the door." My uncle checked the room again. It was empty, but the staff started complaining, hearing knocking inside when it was vacant. One housekeeper quit after hearing a voice call her name from inside the closet, a name she hadn't used since childhood. Then the door wouldn't stay locked. They changed the lock 3 times. Each time, the door would be found wide open in the morning. Security cameras glitched whenever aimed at room 9. A week later, a guest checked into room 9 accidentally. They found him 2 days later, standing in the shower, fully clothed, eyes missing. The mirror had a message written in condensation. "Thank you for letting me out." They sealed room 9, covered the door with plaster, pretended it didn't exist. But my uncle said sometimes, during stormy nights, the outline of the door would reappear, and guests would hear someone whisper, "Room service?" I never used to believe in curses. Superstition felt like a relic from village gossip, the kind of nonsense whispered by old women near temple bells. But that changed the day I entered St. Elias Chapel in northern Scotland. I wasn't even supposed to be there. I was a restoration intern, traveling with a small British preservation team. Our job was to document and photograph old religious sites, clean up, take notes, move on. But when we arrived at St. Elias, we found it abandoned, though the locals insisted it was never closed. That should have been our first red flag. The church sat on a hill surrounded by fog-covered woods. Stone gargoyles cracked from time. The bell tower had long collapsed, and moss grew between the cracks of the stained glass. But it was the inside that chilled us. Everything was perfectly preserved. No dust, no signs of wildlife, just rows of wooden pews and a crimson carpet leading to the altar. It looked too clean, like someone still used it. But there was no electricity, and no caretaker had signed the building log in over a decade. Then I noticed something strange at the very back of the church. A single pew, different from the others, darker wood, warped, with deep grooves carved into the side. On it sat a black book, not a Bible, no title, just a strange symbol on the cover, an open eye bleeding from the pupil. I turned to one of our crew, Ellis. "What's this?" He didn't answer. He was frozen, staring at the pew like it had whispered something. That night, we stayed in the caretaker's lodge across the path. It was falling apart, but had enough beds and a wood stove. We drank whiskey, joked about the ghost pew, and tried to ignore the strange vibes. But Ellis didn't join us. He sat on the porch, looking at the church. At around 3:12 a.m., I woke up to footsteps on the gravel outside. I peered through the window and saw Ellis walking toward the chapel, barefoot, shirtless, like he was in a trance. I followed. Inside the church, the air felt thicker, damp. The temperature had dropped. I saw Ellis standing at the last pew, holding the black book. He was whispering in Latin, a language he didn't know. "Ellis," I said. He turned to me slowly. His eyes were rolled back. And then he screamed, not at me, but at the ceiling. It was a scream of praise, like he had seen God, or something worse. Then he dropped to the floor, convulsing. We rushed him to the hospital in town. The doctors found nothing wrong. No drugs, no trauma, not even exhaustion. But Ellis wouldn't speak. He just stared at the ceiling, mumbling something over and over. "It sits behind the altar now. It moved from the pew. It's closer." We left the church the next day, but I couldn't let it go. I felt pulled back, something unfinished. So I returned alone a week later. The pew was still there, but now the black book was open. The pages weren't printed, they were engraved, like the letters had been carved into the paper with tiny blades. The script shifted when I stared at it, almost like it was squirming. And the pew? It had changed. It was now further up, closer to the altar. No one had moved it. It was heavy, but the floor showed scratches, like the wood had dragged itself forward. Then I heard footsteps behind me. I turned, no one. But the chapel grew colder. My breath misted in the air. Then I saw it. A figure sitting in the pew. Pitch black. No face. Just the shape of a man, barely visible, like it was absorbing the light. It didn't move, didn't speak, but I felt its attention like pressure in my skull. I turned and ran. I left the church, the woods, the town. I never returned. Ellis never recovered. He died 4 months later. Aneurysm, they said. But before he passed, he scratched a symbol into the hospital wall with his fingernail, the eye bleeding. Now here's where it gets truly terrifying. A year later, another restoration team visited St. Elias. They documented the church. In their final report, filed online, there's a photo, wide angle, beautifully captured. You can see the altar, the red carpet, and one pew, sitting directly in front of the pulpit, not in the back anymore. It's moved again, and this time, it's facing backwards, toward the entrance, waiting.